Good morning. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Long time no see. Have we met before? You know, it's great to see you, Chris. It was great to see, first guy I saw walking out was George Cole. Then I got to see Dennis and Ed there in the back. It was, and I see some more folks in this room who are familiar faces from the 13 days that we spent together. And I'm here to tell you, folks, right at the outset, you were exceedingly well represented by your leadership. I was in that room, and I can tell you that from the get-go. So, Chris, thank you. Dennis, thank you. Ed, thank you. To all the other men and women who were there, thank you for your tirelessness. You know, just so you know, I'm going to get back to this in a minute, but this isn't the first time I have spent a fair amount of time with the CWA. I need to tell you the first time I spent a fair amount of time with the CWA. It was back in 2003 or 2004, and I served on the Montgomery County Council in Montgomery County, Maryland. I was a local elected official, and CWA was trying to organize a company you may be familiar with called Comcast. And they wrote me a letter when I was on the council and asked me, they came in to see me, they said, would you write a letter to Comcast asking them to be neutral during this organizing campaign? And I thought about it for a nanosecond, and I said, of course. Because, you know, when you grow up in Buffalo, New York, a good union town, when your surrogate father, I was a kid when my dad died, and my surrogate father was a Teamster. He taught me what the union movement was about. And so I was happy to do that. And I wrote the letter to Comcast along with a colleague of mine on the county council. And this may come as a surprise to you, but they did not remain neutral in that campaign. And not only did they not remain neutral, but when the NLR, when the dispute went to the NLRB, I was on vacation one August, and I got a call from my assistant. She was very flustered, and she said, Tom, you've been subpoenaed. And I said, subpoenaed by whom? Subpoenaed by Comcast in this labor dispute. What should we do? What should we do? And I said, get me the number of the reporter from the Washington Post. And the next day or so, in the Metro section of the Washington Post, it said, Comcast subpoenas 2 county council members. County council members reply, we shall not be bullied by Comcast. And guess what? You know what happened? They withdrew the subpoenas. And they subsequently, knowing that I'm a University of Maryland fan, they invited me to the Comcast Center, to their box, to go watch a few games with them. I want the record to reflect that, you know what? I said no. I can get my own tickets to Maryland games, okay? So, you know, so that was my first foxhole. And turning to the next one. You know, I was following the strike very closely, and my team was. And one of my colleagues, Sharon Block, who is my right-hand person, is in the room over there. And if you could do me a favor and give it up to Sharon, because Sharon really did a lot of work. You know, I've been asked by a lot of folks, how'd you get involved and why'd you get involved? Well, the how is this thing called the telephone, okay? Picked up the phone, as Chris said. I called Chris, called the head of IBEW, and I called Lowell McAdams, CEO of Verizon. And you know what? I did that because I care about you. You know, when 40,000 people and their families are affected, that keeps me up at night. When you're the labor secretary, you think about that. You want to make sure that every worker has that chance to succeed, and you want to make sure that businesses succeed as well, because we all succeed when we all succeed. And so your situation kept me up at night. And I also want to say this. I want to thank all of the Verizon workers who sent me emails during the 13 days. I want you to know I read every single one of them. And your emails motivated me to make sure we worked hard to get everything done that we could get done. And they were very inspiring. And they gave me the sense of urgency that I know your team had and I know the company had throughout this negotiation. And again, it bears repeating. You know, Chris and Ed and Dennis, they were serving you well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one more name. I should have mentioned all the names, and I'm sorry I didn't. But your lawyer, Steve Weissman, your union dues go to your lawyer. He's a hell of a lawyer, okay? And you ought to know that. You have very good judgment, Chris. And as I reflect on the 13 days or so we spent together, what I will never forget is the passion, the commitment, the spirit of constructive engagement that everybody brought to this venture. That doesn't mean that there weren't moments where we were having some challenges. That's what negotiations are about. They have ups and they have downs. I was a trial lawyer back in the day, and some days you have a good day in the courtroom, and some days you have a not so good day in the courtroom. And when you have a good day, you never get too giddy because there's more work ahead. And when you have a bad day, you never get too down because tomorrow the sun will indeed come up. And so we had some good days and we had some bad days, but we were all in that room together. And again, I want to say also thank you to our colleague Allison Beck at the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, because she was also indispensable in these efforts. And what I saw was, again, leaders on both sides who together found innovative ways to adapt to a rapidly changing environment. And I'll tell you, this is a very, very good agreement for both sides. You had concerns about outsourcing, and those concerns were addressed because of the doggedness of your team. You had concerns about people getting assigned to go for weeks at a time to work not in their service area, which is a major disruption for your family. And those concerns were addressed exactly as Chris and Dennis and Ed had advocated. You had concerns about contracting out of work, especially the poll work in the New York area. And those concerns were addressed, and Dennis was tireless in fighting for you there. 1,300 new jobs. There's 1,300 families who can punch their ticket to the middle class. That is good. That's a good agreement. And I'll tell you, folks, the thing that I actually spent a lot of time on, and it's a below-the-radar screen issue to the press, but it's not a below-the-radar screen issue to all of you, is the issue of the reform of the disciplinary process. Because we spent a lot of time on that issue, folks. And the fact that you are now in the middle of a collaborative venture to build an accountability system that is transparent and fair, I believe this is a real opportunity. Because, quite frankly, what I observe about the work that lies ahead is the work to build trust between the parties. Collective bargaining is sometimes messy, but I'll tell you, collective bargaining to me is one of the most important forces that has brought us the middle class in this country, and we know that. And part of the collective bargaining process now and the work that lies ahead, not just the work of voting this week, and I hope that the contract is ratified, and I have confidence that the contract will be ratified because it is a good contract. But the work that lies ahead around building trust is something that I think you are well positioned to do, because I have seen it elsewhere. I own a Ford Escape and a Ford C-Max, and I went down to Louisville, Kentucky, where my Ford Escape is built by union labor from the UAW. Back in 2007, that plant was having an existential crisis. It was almost going out of business. They used to have thousands of workers. They were down to about 700. The economy was hemorrhaging. You remember, we needed the bailout, and the auto industry was on life support, and the Republicans said, pull the plug, and the president said, no, we're going to invest in our workers. And you know what? Today, at that plant, there are 4,400 workers because they came together. They came together. They understood that we have to trust each other. We have to take leaps of faith. And they came together in 2007 around a shared vision of shared sacrifice that has led to the shared prosperity of today. And their most recent collective bargaining agreements gave incredible progress to the men and women working not only at the plant in Louisville, but across the UAW footprint. across America. And so I think we can do this here because I know your leadership and I know how good they are. And I know the commitment on both sides to building trust. I think this is a momentous opportunity, and I do hope you take advantage of it because you know what? I do believe that collective bargaining is about bringing people together to find consensus about how to build win-win solutions. This agreement is a win-win solution. And I recognize that there will still be raw emotions because it was an emotional period. I totally get that. But I hope that as this vote comes to an end, that we can use this opportunity to turn a new page. Because I met a number of generational Verizon workers. I met folks who seemed like they had spent a lot of time with Ma Bell. Well, you know what? Ma Bell is up there in the heavens, and we have the next generation of Ma Bell. But the fact that you now have the first ever contract for Verizon wireless stores is a remarkable point of progress. I don't think Ma Bell ever talked to you about wireless, okay? Let's be honest about that. But that sends an important message that even technology-driven companies can innovate and find efficiencies that grow with their businesses, with unions as their partners, and without having to ship those jobs overseas. So I am very, very excited about what you have done, and it reflects my very strong belief that when unions succeed, America succeeds. When unions succeed, the middle class succeeds. And you know what? I worked for a guy named Ted Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy said it is no coincidence in this country that when the middle class thrived, it was because labor movement thrived. It was because union density was high, and we still see that evidence today in this country. We measure this, folks. This isn't just my gut instinct. These are the facts. Last year, union members earned median $200 higher per week than non-union members. And by the way, that does not include the value of your benefit package. So if you want to join the middle class, you ought to be in a union. That's what I tell my kids. That's what I tell my friends. And so we're going to continue to work on this, and I'm going to get back to the union movement in a moment. But you know what? I do want to talk to you about the fact that during those 13 days we were together, and by the way, we fed you one Saturday night. I have to shout out one particular person. Her name is Sonia Hoover. She is my left-hand person, and some of you met Sonia. Sonia made tacos for 38 people Saturday night when we were together, and my friend, I'm looking for my friend Pat because he was her sous chef that night. You know, it wasn't in the playbook that we would make tacos for 38, but you know what? Anything we could do to bring this to the finish line, we were willing to do it. But I'll tell you, during the 13 days or so that we were together and we welcomed you into our offices, and, I actually did something a week ago or so, if I could digress for a moment, Chris. We brought together all the people who were involved in helping to facilitate your week. Because I love our employees at the Department of Labor. So we brought together the security guards who stayed there till 4 in the morning. We brought together the people who sweep the floors, who are indispensable colleagues of ours. We brought together our IT professionals who made sure you had the IT infrastructure you needed because we had 40 new guests and we've got security requirements and things of that nature. We brought a bunch of people who gave up their offices so you could have offices. And we brought them together about a week or so ago, Chris. And I wanted to say on behalf of all of you and on behalf of Verizon management to them, thank you. And I told them, you know what? If someone asks you what you do for a living, you should tell them you help the working class. You help people to make sure they can punch their ticket to the middle class. You make a difference, whether you are helping to sweep the floors, whether you are making sure our building is secure, whether you're working on IT. We all matter at the Department of Labor, and you all matter at Verizon. And you know what? I want to tell you the message they gave to me. It was a labor of love for them. So it was an honor for them to serve you, just as it was an honor for Sharon and myself to serve you. And while we were doing that, folks, you know, the Department of Labor needs to multitask. And I want to talk to you about a few things that we were doing in addition to this during those 13 days. Because as you know, the mission of the Department of Labor is to strengthen and grow the middle class by fortifying some of those basic pillars of the middle class, making sure that people have the skills to compete for the jobs of today and tomorrow, making sure that people who work a fair day's work get a fair day's pay, making sure that nobody who works a full-time job in this country should have to live in poverty, making sure that when you go to work in the morning, you come home safe at night, because the most fundamental right that workers have in this country is to work in a safe work environment. And making sure that when you save and work that 20, 30, 40 years, that you can retire with dignity. That is what we do at the Department of Labor. We create opportunity in all those different ways. And let me tell you a couple things we did just during those 13 days that strengthen and grow the middle class. We issued a new rule about overtime, because you know what? When you work extra, you should be paid extra in this country, my friends. And I'll tell you, when I was a kid growing up in Buffalo, and yes, I am a Buffalo Bills fan, and our motto will always be, false hope is better than no hope at all. That's who we are in Buffalo. But when I was growing up in Buffalo, you from Buffalo? Oh, okay, but you're a Buffalo Bills fan. Are there any other masochists in the room? Excellent. We'll have a masochist meeting when we're done. And by the way, I'm also a Red Sox fan, so I was a masochist there as well. And when I was growing up in Buffalo, folks, I had a lot of friends whose parents were managers. When I was a kid, managers were middle-class jobs. They were middle-class jobs because they had a lot of responsibility. They often worked 60, 70 hours a week, but they were paid for that. And they were paid for that pursuant to one of the linchpins, one of the crown jewels of our worker protection infrastructure in this country, and that is called the Fair Labor Standards Act. Middle-class jobs deserve a middle-class wage, and that is what the Fair Labor Standards Act was all about. The overtime rule, which was brought to us in no small measure by the labor movement. Thank you for bringing us the 40-hour week. Thank you for bringing us the weekend. The overtime rule stood for that proposition that when you work extra, you should be paid extra. And it stood for that proposition that there are some people who perform management functions so that it is okay, if they're making above a certain threshold and have certain responsibilities, for them to be exempt from overtime. But we compensate them for that. Well, that crown jewel of the Fair Labor Standards Act has lost its luster, and it lost its luster for two reasons. Number one, the threshold that separated overtime eligible workers from overtime exempt workers has not been indexed for inflation. So if we just go back to when Gerald Ford was president, and we indexed that threshold that was there in 75 to today, the threshold would be something like $58,000 a year. Well, the current threshold is actually $23,000 and change. And the second thing that happened that resulted in that crown jewel losing its luster occurred in 2004. And it was a Bush-era regulation. And here's what it did in a nutshell. It took all the leverage from workers and gave it to employers. And so what happened? You can now work 70 hours a week. 99% of your time is stocking shelves. 1% of your time is management. And under that new so-called duties test, you are a manager. So no leverage for workers, all the leverage for business. And the upshot is that there were so many people working 70 hours a week that we have met who are making $25,000 a year. That is wrong. There's no freedom in working for free, my friends. And there were people working effectively 20 and 30 hours for free. And this is what it is about to be middle class in America. This is what this rule is about. The president told us to fix it, and fix it we did. And we announced it during one of those days when y'all were in our office. I had to leave for a little while. We spent a lot of time on this. And you know what this rule will do? This rule is going to help upwards of 13 million people to get access to the wages they deserve. Some of these people are going to get a raise. Some of these people are going to get a benefit that's equally valuable. They will get the benefit of time because they may work 40 hours instead of 60 hours, but they're going to have that 20 hours of freedom, because the most important family value is the value of time you spend with your family. I've coached my kids in basketball or baseball every year for the last 11 years. No one ever sat on their deathbed lamenting that they didn't get to enough meetings in the office. And so I wanted to be there for my kids. I have the luxury of doing that. But so many people, like the person I met, and when I said, "When was the last time you had a vacation?" And he said to me, "Vacation? Vacation is when I only work 40 hours. And so people will either get the benefit of money, they will get the benefit of time, or and everyone will get the certainty of knowing where they stand. And that's why I love working for this president, because every single day his moral compass is, what can we do to help strengthen and grow the middle class in America? And that's what the overtime rule was about. Now, something else happened. I want to tell you one more story about something else that happened when we were working together. We got sued again. That happens a lot at the Department of Labor when we fight for working families. We got sued again by the financial services industry in connection with a rule that we're doing to protect retirees in this country. And folks, if you know somebody who has a 401k or an IRA, you need to listen to this conversation. Because you know what? You know, in my youth, in the days of Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver, you know, those were the days where someone could work 30, 40 years in a job and retire with the defined benefit plan. You retire with the plan, you know, the pension and the party and a pen. The only thing that was in danger of running dry was the ink of the pen, because that defined benefit plan was guaranteed for life. Well, now we've moved from the world of Ozzie and Harriet to the modern family universe, where we have an $11 or $12 trillion IRA and 401k market, and where workers now have to be the masters of their destiny, where you have to make decisions on how to invest your hard-earned retirement savings. And, you know, 3 of the most important decisions people make in their lives are medical, legal, and financial. And when you go to your doctor or a lawyer, they have a legal and ethical obligation to put your interests first. But the financial advisors don't. You should see a report that Elizabeth Warren did. It's a really good report. You know, you go in there and unbeknownst to you, you know, you've got $100,000 in savings. And unbeknownst to you, you go to your advisor and you're the last thing standing in the way of them and that trip to Hawaii for them and their family, if they can simply steer you to that annuity product that works great for their commission but is awful for you. And that's what happens, to the tune of a loss of $17 billion a year for consumers. And so we need to make sure we have a 21st century regulatory scheme to protect consumers. So we did something very, very radical at the Department of Labor. We issued a rule that said financial advisors have to be like lawyers and doctors. They have to put their customers' interests first, God forbid. That's what they have to do. And you know what? Let me say this. We've worked with many folks in the industry who are already doing this. And they tell us, you know what? A guy named Jack Bogle, if you've ever heard of Vanguard. Yeah, he founded Vanguard. He was one of our strongest supporters from the get-go. And he said, "Tom, I've learned this. When you put your customers first, it's great for your customers, and it's even better for business." By the way, that works in just about every company when you put your customers first. You know that? And you know what? So many people in the industry support us in this effort because they understand that it's the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. But there are others who don't. And we've been sued not once, not twice, not 3 times, 5 times now from the industry. They are suing for the right to put their own profits ahead of your best interest. That's what all the lawsuits are about. And they say things like, no, we agree that there should be a best interest standard. But what they also say in these lawsuits is there should be a best interest standard as long as it's not enforceable. As long as it's just, the marketing material. And what our rule said was your marketing material, which said that we put you first, it's no longer a marketing slogan, it's the law. And one of the lawsuits said that they have a First Amendment right to give conflicted advice. And I got on the phone as soon as I read that and called my brothers who are doctors and my sister who's a doctor. And I said, guess what? If you ever get sued, tell them that you had a First Amendment right to commit malpractice. See how that flies. See if that'll work with the medical board. See if that'll work with the jury. I don't quite get it. But folks, I'm here to tell you that the Department of Labor, I'm so proud of the work we were able to do with you. And I'm equally proud of the work we're doing to strengthen and grow the middle class. We have made so much progress in this nation. When this president took office, he inherited the worst mess of our lifetime. We lost 2.4 million jobs in the 3 months before he took office. We've now had 75 consecutive months of private sector job growth, the longest streak on record, 14.5 million jobs. And folks, we accomplished this with absolutely no help from the Republicans. Mitch McConnell, I appreciate your transparency. I want Barack Obama to be a one-term president. That's what he said, and he failed. And he failed because Barack Obama was looking after the UAW, was working after auto workers, was looking after American workers. And that's why we made progress. But folks, we still have work to do. The unfinished business of this recovery is to make sure that we have shared prosperity, that the rising tide lifts all the boats and not just the yachts. And we know that there are still all too many people working 40, 50 hours a week, and they're getting their food at the food pantry. I meet people in the Fight for 15 movement. I met a woman in Detroit, and the night before I met her, she and her 3 children slept in their car. We can do better than that as the United States of America. What we need to do now, my friends, is we need your help. Because this Eeyore caucus in Congress, they forget all the stuff. The Republicans forget all the progress we made. They forget the ditch we had to climb out of because it's inconvenient. Those truths are inconvenient. And we need your help. We need your help to vindicate some basic principles. The basic principle that zip code should never determine destiny in this country. The basic principle that nobody who works a full-time job should have to live in poverty in this country. The basic principle that when we summon our better angels of hope, when we summon our better angels of optimism and inclusion, instead of the darker demons of fear, pessimism, and isolation, that's when we do best as a country. And the collective power of we has always been embodied by the labor movement. And that is why I will always be at your side. Because the collective power of we is about knowing that we all succeed when we all succeed. It's about knowing that our parents did not teach us that if you blow out your neighbor's candle, it makes your candle shine brighter. When your neighbor's candle blows out, we help them light it again. That's what the labor movement is about, and that's what it's been about throughout our years. It's about protecting people. And we've been doing it for over 100 years. When the Industrial Revolution forced working people into unsafe conditions and poverty wages, we banded together to reject the notion that working people's dignity and lives would be capitalism's collateral damage. When women took to the streets to demand the right to vote, we found the political will to ratify the 19th Amendment. When the Great Depression destroyed our economy and our collective hope, we came together to redefine the social compact. That's when we established minimum wage, overtime, Social Security, workers' compensation, the right to collective bargaining, other rights that brought us the middle class in America. And when civil rights activists stood up to demand that our nation must realize the promise of equal rights, you were there. The 50th anniversary of the March on Washington was one of the first things I attended. in my current position. That was a march for jobs and a march for justice. The labor movement was always there. CWA has not simply been a labor movement, it's been a civil rights movement throughout its very esteemed history. You were right there, and you will always be there, whether it's Larry Cohen yesterday or whether it's Chris Shelton today and all the other remarkable people. That's what you're about. But we need your help because you know what? We need you to continue the fight for 15. We need you to continue to advocate here to raise the federal minimum wage. We need your advocacy for comprehensive immigration reform because too many people are living in the shadows. We need your advocacy for election reform because until we fix our broken politics in Washington, until we overturn Citizens United, we will not be able to fix our broken politics in Washington. You know, we need you to continue to shine that light on inequality. You know, when the Wall Street bonus pool in 2014 is roughly twice the amount of money that all full-time minimum wage workers earned in the United States, that is an economy that's out of balance. And you continue to call attention to it. And we need you not only to call attention to it, but we need you to continue to act. Because you know what, folks? Dr. King said that the arc of a moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But what he also said is that it does not bend on its own. It bends when we marshal the collective power of we, the most important word in a democracy. President Obama said when he marked the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, is that simple two-letter word, we. It's amazing what we can do when we marshal that collective power, when ordinary people do extraordinary things. Well, there are extraordinary people in this room who've been doing extraordinary things for years. We are at a major inflection point in our country. Will we build bridges or will we build walls? I am confident that with your help, we will continue to build bridges. Bridges to the middle class for so many people. Bridges to prosperity and opportunity for everyone. Those are the bridges that you have been building throughout your storied tenure. Those are the bridges you built in the most recent collective bargaining agreement that I hope will be ratified. And those were the bridges and continue to be the bridges that working together, we will build together. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your doggedness.